Is there anything better than a masterpiece film that seems perfect in every way? Yeah, a masterpiece film where there is one glaring mistake that makes you realize even geniuses are still human. Renowned directors like Christopher Nolan, Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock, George Lucas, and Peter Jackson have all allowed, just frankly embarrassing mistakes, into some of the greatest films ever made. Let's take a look at those.
Not so fast, handsome. You got something for me?
Now, there are some mistakes that are forgivable. When you're shooting complicated films like Inception and Tenet, there are bound to be a few mistakes that slip through the cracks. Of course, then there are the mistakes that are so huge you have to wonder how no one caught it. In The Dark Knight Rises, Bane organizes a Wall Street heist in the middle of the day. It is made explicitly clear that they have a limited amount of time to rip off Bruce Wayne, yet somehow the chase with Batman that happens minutes later is in the middle of the night. Apparently, one of Batman's gadgets makes it instantly nighttime any time he shows up. Pirates of the Caribbean is a true action classic. It has pirates, ghosts, giant ship battles, and, cowboys? If you look closely as Jack Sparrow regains control of his vessel, you'll see an extra wearing a cowboy hat chilling in the background. I don't exactly know who the cowboy pirate is supposed to be in the final scene, but apparently the Black Pearl scored itself a gunslinger. Frankly, that sounds like a better story than some of the sequels. While we all know that the original Star Wars movie is one of the most famous films ever made, that wasn't exactly what many of the cast and crew thought during filming. The strange film with giant talking bears, weird monsters, and funny costumes looked like it was going to be a flop before the John Williams score and amazing special effects brought it all to life. One of the parts of the film that showed just how ridiculous the filming of George Lucas's masterpiece really was is the infamous part where a stormtrooper bangs his head on the door here. You'd think they would have called for another take, but maybe Lucas wanted to make it very clear just how incompetent stormtroopers really are. If so, mission accomplished. Stanley Kubrick is probably known more for his attention to detail than any other filmmaker. That's why it's so surprising that one of his best-known films, The Shining, has a giant mistake concerning its iconic setting, the Overlook Hotel. The film begins with a slow shot through the mountains until we get our first look at the hotel from above. The only problem? That giant hedge maze that is the centerpiece of the film's finale is nowhere to be seen. Who knows, maybe the hedge maze is a ghost as well. Sometimes mistakes are silly moments that take away from the seriousness of the moment. Then there are the ones that are so dramatic that they actually make the scene much scarier than intended. In Django Unchained, there's an infamous sequence where Leonardo DiCaprio slams his glass on a table and it breaks in his hand. He spends the rest of the scene with a bloody hand that he proceeds to rub across Kerry Washington's face. Bro, social distancing, come on. This was actually a real moment where DiCaprio broke glass in his hand, but stayed in character. Luckily, they used fake blood for poor Kerry Washington in the next shot, cause, gross. Braveheart may be an iconic retelling of the life of Scottish icon William Wallace, but it has long been criticized for some of its inaccuracies. The real part of the movie that they should have a problem with is the car that appears as the two armies are charging at each other. I know they wanted to demonstrate just how overwhelming the British army was, but having them backed up by an automobile is just ridiculous. Come on, guys. American Sniper is a very serious film about the cost battle has on soldiers, both abroad and at home. So that's why it threw everyone out of the movie when Bradley Cooper was shown holding the fakest baby I've ever seen in a movie. Holy goodness, is that a Cabbage Patch Kid? Come on. It genuinely looks like Clint Eastwood grabbed a baby doll from a toy store and just hoped no one would notice.
You can only circle the flame so long.
Alfred Hitchcock is known as the true master of suspense, and his attention to detail is why. He was infamous for going beyond what most directors would consider to be normal behavior in order to produce a perfect sequence. That's why it's so surprising that one of his most famous films, North by Northwest, features one of the most famous film mistakes of all time. If you look closely, you will see a young extra covering his ear before the gunshot in the next scene. Clearly, they had filmed this scene several times, and the kid was just anticipating the loud boom. Either that or Hitchcock wanted us to think the kid was able to see the future. Casino Royale is one of the best opening days for any Bond in the history of the franchise. While that film served Daniel Craig well, its sequel was noticeably, less polished. While a lot of that has to do with various problems that held up production, there was one mistake that you can only blame on the extra in question. Behind Bond, you can clearly see a street sweeper pretending to sweep instead of actually sweeping. I mean, I think it required more effort on his part not to actually sweep the floor than it would have just been to do it right. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy is such an example of film production at its finest that the DVDs have more behind-the-scenes content than they do actual hours of movie. While most of that content shows just how well everything came together for the trilogy, there are also a few well-known mistakes that made it into the series, especially the Two Towers. Pippin's binds magically disappear right before he actually severs them. Karl Urban drops his sword, and most notably, Viggo Mortensen shatters his foot as he punts a helmet across the field. There's really nothing Indiana Jones hates more than snakes. Well, apparently Harrison Ford doesn't take chances with them either. In the famous sequence where Indy comes face to face with a cobra, you can clearly see the cobra's reflection in the glass that's keeping Ford safe from the snake. Or maybe it was keeping the snake safe from Ford. He did punch Ryan Gosling right in the face during Blade Runner 2049, so I feel like that cobra made the right call. Avengers Endgame is the biggest film to release in the last several years. It is a true climax for the first saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's why it's so surprising that there's an obvious mistake in the film's big battle sequence. If you look closely, you can clearly see a giant Ant-Man fighting alongside the Avengers while Ant-Man and the Wasp go for the time machine at the exact same time. Who knows, maybe one of Scott Lang's superpowers is to duplicate himself and he just never told anyone. The Last Samurai is all about a society of old-school warriors coming to terms with the modern world, trying to wipe them out. The actual greatest warrior in the film isn't one of the samurai at all, but a horse that actually caused some real-life damage. If you look closely, you can see a sequence where a horse gets spooked and actually kicks one of the extras right between his legs. I don't think anyone told the horse that they weren't really about to go to battle. Yeesh. One of the pivotal moments in Quentin Tarantino's instant classic, Pulp Fiction, is the moment when hitmen Jules and Vincent survive a hail of bullets from a gun that even Dirty Harry would think was a little much. They look behind them and see that every bullet was embedded in the wall behind them instead of their bodies. Funnily enough, you can clearly see the bullet marks in the wall before any of the shots were fired. Did anyone else always think it was weird at the end of the Goonies when Data talks about how scary the octopus was? That's because there's no actual octopus in the final cut of the movie. The sequence with the monster was cut, but somehow Data's line made it through. Apparently, Goonies never say deleted scene.
The octopus was very scary. Oh, no. Yeah, it was very dangerous.
It's kind of baffling that in this day and age, editors still allow such basic, obvious mistakes to pass through the final cut. So anyway, be sure to like and subscribe to ScreenRant for more flawless content.